Hey guys, so I have been running with this Healhance build that I kind of developed while I was on the Wrath Classic beta, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. I don't think this is a fully original idea. I'm sure other people have been doing stuff like this for quite some time, but this is just something that I was messing with during my time on beta and wanted to share with you, as I think the results were really fascinating. This turned out to be one of the most fun healing specs that I've ever played to date, including every expansion. And I think it's really solid. I think this spec has a lot of strengths, and I wanted to share with you guys. So without further delay, let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the description of what is Healhance. Well, it's essentially a melee healer that gains mana back and gets instant cast heals while doing damage in melee range. Healhance is essentially just like a Mistweaver Monk in Wrath of the Lich King. Your strengths lie in your overall damage, the massive amount of buffs that you bring, and your mobility. If you're a Resto Shaman main who's searching for a way to spice up your dungeon leveling or heroic spams, look no further, as Healhance modernizes the healing landscape and pushes the limits for your dungeon clears. Let's go into the talents for Healhance. Now, we do go pretty deep in enhancement. First off, we're going to get Ancestral Knowledge, obvious choice. We're going to go for Enhancing Totems because we are a support class and we want to provide more strength and agility for our team. We're going to get Thundering Strikes, no question here. We're going for Improved Shields for more mana back on our Water Shield procs. We're going to get Elemental Weapons, helps our Earth Living. We go for Shamanistic Focus, as this helps us a lot for sustaining mana because we are shocking on every single pack. If not once, we are doing it sometimes twice and 3 times in every given trash pack. We're of course going for Flurry. Flurry is going to help us increase our attack speed and get us more Maelstrom procs. Got to go for Spirit Weapons, and of course we're going for Wind Fury Totem, improved Wind Fury Totem, just to provide that 20% haste for our party in case we do not have a Frost DK or a DK tank with double buff. We're going to go for Unleashed Rage to provide the 10% attack power, of course. At this point, we kind of have 3 points to spare that we need to push further down into the tree. I prefer to spend them into Mental Dexterity, although there could be a case to be made for Weapon Mastery being more. However, I think you gain more from Mental Dexterity, just me personally. However, feel free to use these 3 points as you will. We, of course, want to go Dual Wield. This is a pretty important part of our build. And Storm Strike with Improved Storm Strike. We're also going Dual Wield Specialization, as I think the increased hit chance for dual wielding is really important. If we're not hitting, we're not getting Maelstrom procs, so that's a pretty big deal. We actually opt to skip Lava Lash here. Just in general, Lava Lash does very little damage in general for our entire kit. And I just don't think the point is worth it. I'd rather spend points elsewhere, and we can absolutely skip Lava Lash without sacrificing a whole lot at all for overall damage, or even for just the feel for the kit at all. So we are completely skipping Lava Lash. We do go for Shamanistic Rage, as this is how we're going to get mana back in melee range pretty reliably, on top of improved Storm Strike. Every time we're Storm Striking here, we're actually going to be gaining more mana back than the cost of Storm Strike. Storm Strike not only gives us mana, but it will give us stacks pretty reliably of Maelstrom weapons, so it's a very important part of your kit. We're going to go for Mental Quickness here. We're going to get a 5 out of 5 Maelstrom weapon, and we're going to get Feral Spirit. Now, you do not have to get Feral Spirit. The reason I like getting Feral Spirit is for 2 reasons. One, I do like the damage of the wolves. I think wolves do really good damage, and I really like the mobility that you get from Feral Spirit. Every time you cast Feral Spirit, you can use an ability that comes with their pet bar called Spirit Walk, which gives you movement speed. And you can use this twice per summon of your wolves, which gives you just tons of movement speed that other healers just genuinely do not have access to. I really do like Feral Spirit. However, I can see a case to be made using this 1 talent point for potentially going for something like Nature Swiftness. If you have Nitro Boots and you are an engineer, there's definitely a case to be made to drop Feral Spirit and go for something like Nature Swiftness. However, I've had a lot of success, a ton of success going Elemental Subspec rather than Restoration Subspec. Every time I've gone Restoration Subspec, my damage has been way worse, and my mana has been way worse. So what we do here is we go into Convection. This saves us a ton on mana. We call Flame, as this is going to improve a lot of our damage done overall. We're going to spend 2 points here in Concussion. However, you could spend them in Elemental Devastation. I found that Concussion worked well for me, but if you want to spend them in Elemental Devastation, that's completely up to you. We really like Elemental Focus here. This gives us some clear casting, which helps so much for our mana. We're going to spend 4 points here in Elemental Fury to go down the tree to get improved Fire Nova, as reducing the cooldown on our Fire Nova and increasing the damage done by it is probably the single largest DPS increase possible for this build. And then with our last 3 points, we're going to go for improved Healing Wave. Now, I wish we could go 5 out of 5 here, as Healing Wave is a really important part of the kit for Healhance. Because oftentimes you're not actually getting a 5 out of 5 Maelstrom weapon stack. If you do not have 5 out of 5, that means your cast time will not be instant. However, reducing the cast time of Healing Wave at all is still really important, because we will be Healing Waving a lot in a dungeon setting. So, speaking of Healing Wave, let's talk about Glyphs. Because our most important glyph for this build is actually Glyph of Healing Wave. This means our Healing Wave will have a heal us for 20% of the healing effect when you heal someone else. This is essentially like a weaker version of a binding heal. This glyph is phenomenal and absolutely great for this build. Next glyph that I like to run with is Glyph of Chain Heal. This is pretty much a staple with any Resto Shaman build. This just kind of feels like a no-brainer to me. I like to go Glyph of Chain Heal, but we definitely have some flexibility here that we can get into. And then the third glyph, I like to go with Glyph of Fire Nova. Again, this is just such a large portion of our damage. This is going to reduce the cooldown by 3 seconds on our Fire Nova spell. Now, potentially some other glyphs that you could go is something like maybe Glyph of Earth Living, which is going to increase the chance of your Earth Living weapon to trigger. That's a decent choice, although I wouldn't recommend it. Another decent choice is going to be Glyph of Healing Stream Totem. Now, Glyph of Healing Stream Totem is actually decent, because we're going to be dropping Healing Stream Totem pretty much 24/7 in a dungeon setting, and Healing Stream Totem doesn't do all that bad. It just is nice passive healing that just is going to cover some blanket healing on your party. No worries whatsoever. Just want to throw out a quick honorable mention. We're obviously not going for Glyph of Lesser Healing Wave because we do not have Earth Shield. There's nothing we could do there. So a lot of this is actually, we're just going to skip out on completely. A decent glyph here is actually Glyph of Water Mastery. If you really feel like you need more passive mana regeneration, Glyph of Water Mastery is a really solid choice for you early on if you do not have a whole lot of gear. But those are the three glyphs that I like to run with 24/7 as a Healhance. Now let's talk about how to play Healhance. Now the most important thing with Healhance is, of course, getting within melee range. And your #1 priority of all things should be hitting Stormstrike on cooldown. Again, hitting Stormstrike is not only going to give us mana, but pretty reliably give us at least 1 stack of Maelstrom, sometimes even 2, just from hitting Stormstrike just 1 time. It's a very reliable spender, and we want to get this on cooldown ASAP. Now, assuming you have Stormstrike on cooldown, what's next? Well, getting Flame Shock up on the target while running in is always a good choice. Of course, you want to have your totems down, and you want to spam Fire Nova as often as possible. And then you just react accordingly. When you see incoming damage, you might need to heal your tank. Knowledge of the encounters and knowledge of incoming damage on your tank is going to do wonders for you here. Sometimes you need to spend your Maelstrom weapon stacks at 1 or 2 stacks. Sometimes you can wait all the way until 5 stacks. Sometimes you can get all the way to 5 stacks and there's nothing to heal, and you can dump on a Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt. It's completely up to you, and you must react accordingly depending on the incoming damage situation. Make sure you're making good use of Shamanistic Rage, as Shamanistic Rage is going to give you a lot of mana back. You're only going to be getting this mana back, however, if you're keeping melee uptime on target. So it's really good to save Shamanistic Rage for bosses and then use it as often as you can during trash in between bosses as well. Another really important cooldown for Healhance is going to be your Spirit Wolves. Now, like I said, this is going to be a big damage boost for you, as well as mobility. So using Spirit Wolves on bosses is going to be a big DPS gain for you. But if your tank gets ahead of you, maybe you had to res someone, or maybe you had to drink up to full mana, or perhaps you just looked at your other monitor for a second and your tank is just charging ahead and pulling a pack without you, that's a really good time for you to use Spirit Wolves. I'll provide a macro down below in the description of this video that you can use while summoning Spirit Wolves to help you use your Spirit Walk so that you can get the speed boost to get into melee range. Now, assuming your tank has run ahead of you and you use Spirit Wolves to catch up, again, the first thing you're going to want to do is try to get that Storm Strike off so you can get a little bit of Maelstrom up before you have to hard cast any heal on your tank, assuming he's taken some damage while charging ahead. And that's essentially it. You're shocking Flame Shock, you're shocking Earth Strike, you're doing as much Fire Nova damage with Magma Totem as you possibly can, and just providing totem and buffs for your party. It's a really straightforward thing, it's not all too complicated, and it essentially plays just like an enhanced Shaman. However, the overall damage is absolutely nutty. You can see here in this video that I'm talking over right now, my overall damage so far, up through the first boss of Heroic AN, I am topping the meters. Literally #1 damage for the entire party, for this Heroic dungeon, mind you, is the healer. That's me. No one is dying. No one is at any risk of dying here, and I am doing #1 DPS. This is the kind of potential that you can see with a build like this, and I definitely encourage you to push the limits while playing with it. Now, I'll try to briefly go over how I would recommend building out a Healhance. With this Healhance pre-raid bis, I mean, this is nothing like all too serious. I wouldn't look too deeply into this. I just want to give you my thoughts on how I would build out a Healhance so that you can know what items and how you would gem it and how you would gear it accordingly. Now, for this list, we're just kind of aiming for spell, haste, and crit, and not a whole lot of MP5, and we really aren't going for any hit cap in particular. I found a lot of success in my dungeons while running with absolutely 0 hit, so you don't really need it all that much. I do want to give a shout out though to the 2-piece elemental set. Not only does it save us mana on Lightning Bolt, but it's just itemized really well. It does have a little bit of hit on the gloves, which I appreciate, and you could use this 2-piece with your resto set as well. These items are solid in their own right, and so there's nothing wrong with going 2-piece LE here for these 2 items as well. Also, another shout out to the 2-piece tier 6, the wrists and the boots coming from Sunwell. These are awesome. If you can get your hands on these, absolutely use them. Chain Heal and Healing Wave are our 2 big spenders that we use with our Maelstrom weapon, so that's going to save you a good amount on mana right there. As for weapons, it works out just like a spell hands. We want to use something like War Mace from Heroic Nexus in our main hand, and in our offhand we want to use something like Pride. For enchants, I recommend going with double spell power on both weapons. And in terms of using Earth Living and Flame Tongue, I do prefer to use Flame Tongue weapon in the main hand and Earth Living weapon in the offhand. Now, I have tried doing double Earth Living dual wield, and double Earth Living is okay. However, I felt like it didn't provide nearly as much damage for the sacrifice that I was making. You do gain increased proc rates on Earth Living by doing double Earth Living, but it genuinely did not feel worth it at all. So I definitely recommend you go Flame Tongue main hand, Earth Living offhand, and I feel like that is the perfect halfway point between the two that just works very, very well with Healhance. And that's pretty much it. I mean, Spark of Life is kind of like a no-brainer healer trinket here, and then Meteorite Whetstone just works perfectly for all things Enhance, so everything else just works great. Both Enhance and Resto Shamans are going to want to be stacking Haste in the first place, so everything about this kit just makes sense, and it works. So that's how I would build out a Healhance. Now, one question I get asked all the time is, how would Healhance do in a raid environment? And the answer is, sadly, I don't think all too well. You have two major flaws with Healhance in a raid environment. One is you're missing a massive amount of hit rating and expertise in order for your kit to work out really well. And two, you're just kind of a half-assed healer and a half-assed damage dealer. It doesn't really work out to be all too great unless you're maybe in a 10-man scenario. You see, in a 10-man scenario, like Naxxramas, for example, pretty much the entire raid could be solo healed by something like a Holy Paladin. And if the entire raid can be solo healed like a Holy Paladin, then why do you need to exist as some type of pseudo second healer when you're not really all that needed? You may as well just go full damage. And if it could be solo healed, then it could potentially be solo healed by a Resto Shaman. So why be Healhance when you could just be full Resto and just have someone else go full DPS? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to play Healhance in a raid environment, although I definitely could see a case to be made if you really, really wanted to, just for fun. Let's say, for example, you did have a Holy Paladin in your Nax 10 run, and maybe he was a Pug, or maybe he was a Fresh 80, and you don't want to necessarily 2-heal because you don't really want to slow yourselves down, but you don't really necessarily want to put all your faith in this one guy to solo heal. So maybe playing something like Healhance is kind of like a halfway point for you. That way you can, you know, cover where heals might be needed and assist where needed, but also increase the pace of the overall raid and provide a little bit more damage where needed, and overall just have a fun time because Healhance is ridiculously fun. In conclusion, Healhance is really just the start. The truth is, all healers in Wrath of the Lich King can and should be finding ways to do some damage in a dungeon setting. You could easily do something like this as an Elemental Shaman, or a Holy/Ret Preg Paladin build, or a Holy Nova spamming Priest, or even a Boomy/Resto Druid. There's plenty of room to push out respectable levels of damage while keeping your parties alive in a dungeon setting. Particularly the melee style and fast cast heals of this Healhance build have been ridiculously fun for me, and I'd encourage you to try it out for yourself, because once we start gaining just a little bit of gear in Wrath, your tanks will require less and less healing, giving you even more opportunities to do damage like this. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and best of luck out there. Try not to grief your dungeon groups too much, and I appreciate all the support and love with this Healhance build, guys. Anyways, take care. Peace.